For those who aren't aware of what's going on, a black man named George Floyd was arrested by police for being suspected of, from what I understand, possibly using a counterfeit $20 bill. Now, we have no idea if he did or not at this point, but what we do know is that while he was in handcuffs on the ground, a police officer had his knee on Floyd's neck as Floyd pleaded for the officer to release pressure off of his neck because he couldn't breathe. Floyd told the officer 15 times that he couldn't breathe until he ultimately suffocated to death. Now, the police claimed that Floyd was resisting arrest, but there were a lot of bystanders there that recorded the event with their cell phones, which seemed to clearly demonstrate that that claim was false. In the video, Floyd clearly seems to not have been resisting arrest. Now, there's some cases like this where I'm like, okay, I could see how this could have possibly happened, or I could see some possible reason why the officer reacted in the way that he did. But in this case, it just isn't like that. The police officer didn't seem to be concerned with Floyd at all, and he looked almost happy as Floyd pleaded for his life while he kept his knee on Floyd's neck. Even long after Floyd lost consciousness, he still refused to release pressure off of Floyd's neck. Now, from what I understand, police officers are trained to know that this can be fatal, which is why they're trained to avoid putting force on someone's neck when they're on their stomach and in cuffs. I linked an article in the description if you want to know more about that. But from the video footage, it definitely appears as if the officer was intending to kill Floyd, when as a police officer, he was supposed to be the one protecting lives rather than taking the lives of people who aren't posing any threat to the lives of others. Now, all 4 cops that were involved were fired, but understandably, a lot of people feel like that just isn't enough. And as always, there could be new facts that come out that could change things, but in this case, it looks pretty doubtful from what we have seen already. Now, from a Christian perspective, reactions to these situations or similar cases of injustice may be confusing. And I think part of the reason why is an over-identification with the political parties and with political narratives. But when we look at the Bible, I think it becomes much clearer how we should think about situations of injustice. When I did my study on slavery in the Old Testament, I couldn't help but realize just how much in the Old Testament that God told people to protect, love, and take care of those who were marginalized. Over and over again, you read of God calling for his people to take care of the poor, the widowed, the fatherless, the orphans, the foreigners, and so on. In the New Testament, you see the same, and you also see how much time Jesus spent with those who were marginalized in that society, and how he told us to love and care for them. Jesus was even born in Nazareth, which is sort of like what ghettos are in today's culture. Usually when we read about justice in the Bible, it's in response to those who are marginalized. Now, throughout the entire Bible, God cares for those who are marginalized and calls us to fight against injustice and protect and defend those who aren't able to do so themselves. Since we as Christians today have largely, in my view, over-identified with political parties and political narratives, when we see stuff like this, a lot of the time, our first instinct is to find a way to justify the actions of the officers. But when we do, we come across as not caring at all about the situation and the people and the communities that suffered from injustice. We forget that they're real people, just like everyone who's watching this video right now. Their lives are every bit as valuable as our own. The message that we send to people is that we aren't loving, we don't care about them as people, and if we do care, we do so far less than we care about defending our political narratives. The problem is that message is in so many ways counter to the heart of the gospel, the message of Christianity, and the message that we as Christians should be sending to the rest of the world. When people feel like Christians don't care about the issues of injustice that affect them strongly, then why would they care to hear what we have to say about their salvation? As Christians, at this point, from what we've seen in the George Floyd situation, should make all of us upset. Situations like this make God upset. And as Christians, we're supposed to grieve with those who are grieving. And that should be our first reaction to these kinds of situations. Titus 3:14 tells us that we have to learn how to devote ourselves to doing what's good in order to provide for the urgent needs and not live unproductive lives. It's times like this which gives us an opportunity not only to speak out against the injustice, but also to see what we can do to bring about justice for those who were involved. So I think our first response should be one of compassion, not one of trying to find ways to justify this situation. And with compassion, we should pray for those who were affected and fight alongside of those who are fighting against injustice. When our first reaction is to find a way to defend a political narrative, I would argue that we're doing it all out of order. Let's not forget that our Lord and Savior was also a victim of injustice. The people of his day wrongfully murdered him as well. That's all the more reason for us to not go run and try to find ways to justify what the victim could have possibly done wrong before having compassion for the life that was lost. Now, of course, much more could be said about this, but those are some of the quick thoughts that I had on the situation. And if you want to see what my thoughts are on forgiveness in situations like this and how they overlap with issues of justice, see a video I did on Christian forgiveness and justice that I linked down below in the description. But that's the video, so go ahead and let me know what your thoughts are on this situation. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know down below. And the next time you find that your first reaction is in defense of a political narrative, what are you gonna say? What do you mean?